will start things off with Susanne and her view on business opportunities in the space industry. Susanne, welcome again, and the floor is yours.
Andreas, thank you very much for the kind introduction. I will try to share my screen, and please let me know whether it works.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So do you still see the presentation mode?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we can see your presentation and you, and we can hear you very well.
Perfect. So all set, ready, go. So I will shortly give an overview about Brimatech, my company, and business opportunities in the new space area. I will also dive into Europe's space economy, give a bit of an overview of the differences between new space and old space, and what you as an actor have to consider when doing business there. I will also, of course, talk about the space opportunities and give a summary and outlook. First of all, I would like to introduce Brimatech, my company, very shortly. So Brimatech stands for Bridging Markets and Technologies. So what we do is we identify and work with potential users. We do business development and plan how to exploit high-tech innovations. We do that in different industries. First of all, in the aerospace domain, in green tech, and in key technologies such as artificial intelligence or industrial production. But most of the time, we work in the space market. There, we are usually involved in up and downstream projects. As you mentioned before, we are ESA's technology transfer broker here in Austria. In that role, we transfer technologies between industries. For example, we identify space technologies and find application areas on Earth or vice versa. And just as N-Space, we also support the newly founded ESA Phi-Lab in Austria with our business expertise. Okay, so let's start with a bit of a definition, let's say. What is new space? I know new space has been quite a buzzword in the last years with a lot of expectations and definitions behind. For me, I would say it's the commercialization of the space industry, generating revenues with products and services in space, most of the times with commercial customers. It encompasses a very broad range of upstream and downstream technologies, which I will present in more detail later on today. However, the expected growth rate is really substantial. It is forecasted, depending on the source you rely on, between 8 and 10% per year until 2040. And this growth will be driven by new and old technologies, as well as new business models. However, as you might know, Europe faces quite some challenges when it comes to space as compared to the large space players, the US, China, and Japan. I don't know if you've seen the Draghi report, which came out last autumn. A lot of information is in there. I think it's a very nice source of information. You can see that the EU lags behind in space funding. For example, in 2023, the public expenditure on space in the EU was around $13 billion US, as compared to 73 billion in the US, which is an amount 5 times larger. There you can also already see how large or how big the spending in the US is in space. But also China is not or is overtaking Europe. It's expected to reach an expenditure of around $20 billion US by 2030. Also, private investments in space are quite substantial. In Europe, in 2023, it was about 1 billion euros. whereas in the US, it was estimated with around 4 billion euros. I think when talking about space, defense may not be unmentioned. Defense has an enormous weight in the game. Dual use has become socially more acceptable in Europe since the start of the war in the Ukraine. Just for you to give you an impression, in 22, the defense applications accounted for about 60% of space-related expenditures in the US. Which is quite something. In China, it was around 38% spending for defense applications. In the years to come, so in the next 10 years, around 6,500 institutional satellites are forecasted to be launched worldwide. And the market share for Europe for that is around 10%. So when you want to serve that market, always keep into mind what the percentage of Europe is and which other players are in the game. Of course, there's also another challenge in Europe, which is the reliance or the dependency on non-EU suppliers. For example, components like semiconductors here, Europe is heavily has to heavily rely on non-European suppliers, and this is of course this lays the ground for geopolitical vulnerabilities, weaknesses in resilience of space supply chains. And in some countries, it may even undermine the continuity of the space program. However, there are also good news. Space is a net contributor to Europe's trade balance, and it's a really boost in the European innovation system and economy as a whole. So Europe is especially strong in equipments, in subsystems and satellite systems. New space is a super good ground for new companies and startups. In the area of the startups, I would like to especially mention the ESA Business Incubation initiative, which has centers all around Europe and where you can also find various locations in Austria that will be able to support your space startup. There's also this the Cassini Space Entrepreneurship Initiative by the European Unity, which is a quite important initiative in this regard. And I think this is also quite an important thing. The Commission is now or has seen, for example, from the US example, that it is very important to step up as in a role as an anchor customer. So the European Commission is now facilitating the access of new space companies to public procurement contracts. For example, with the award of contracts to act as data suppliers for Copernicus contributing missions. Apropos Copernicus, in the downstream domain, I would like to mention two European flagship projects, Copernicus and Galileo. Copernicus, maybe you know, offers really or is one of the largest missions in the Earth observation domain, and it offers comprehensive Earth observation data, most of them free of charge, including for environmental monitoring, such as, for example, sea level rise monitoring, disaster management, and so on. By the way, the Earth observation market is quite large. It's led by the US, but closely followed by Europe. US has a share of 42% of the Earth observation market and Europe 41%. The second flagship project from Europe is Galileo. It is the equivalent to the US GPS, and it provides the most accurate and secure positioning and timing information, including military applications. For example, Galileo has the high accuracy service, which is much more precise than other global navigation satellite systems, such as, for example, Baidu or GPS or even GLONASS. Just to give you a flavor, 10% of EU's GDP is enabled by satellite navigation. Around 4 billion smartphones and more than 900 phone and tablet models are enabled by Galileo, not only GPS, and 69 of new agriculture machinery is supported by Galileo. The new space domain really, for me, is a market shift from a business to government market, where you, as a supplier, had to serve some institutional customers in the past, which were ESA or NASA and so on. And now it's a business-to-business market, or it tends to be a more business-to-business market with commercial customers. Most of the space players we know and see today, they have a really strong heritage in the old space economy, and they are used to work with government customers. However, these players are most of the time very risk adverse, which is quite natural as the governments or the authorities are administering taxpayers' money. The decision-making processes are really long. Just think about ESA, where 22 member states participate and have to make decisions together. The objectives of the old space missions are often for governmental purposes. So for example, infrastructure development, scientific or defense. And of course, the need for regulated products and services is quite high, which for them is a means of risk reduction. The new space, on the contrary, implies the shift to a market that is dominated by commercial companies, being the customers. And their focus is more on lowering costs, with the implication that the reliability of the technology might be less than previously 110%. Which means higher risk taking. Also, the speed, of course, is a lot higher, shorter sales cycles, also supported by faster decision making within companies. And usually it also comes with a higher demand towards confidentiality. All this new rule of games, they lower the entry barriers into the space, and they open up new opportunities for old space players, but also for new in-space, out-of-the-box thinking companies. Especially spin-in opportunities are welcome. Spin-in for us is established technologies on Earth that can potentially be used in space. For example, ESA is now especially also looking into spin-in opportunities that they can use for space missions. So, but what exactly are these opportunities? A very crowded slide with a lot of opportunities, I hope. So, as I said before, in space, even more in the future, there are vast opportunities to use technologies that we developed here for Earth. So these new technologies and services needed in the new space domain are broad-folded and can benefit from terrestrial heritage. So for example, energy, or more specifically solar power, which is used for powering satellites, space stations, space rovers, solar sails, and a very promising application in the future, space-based solar power, where solar power is collected in space and beamed to Earth using microwaves or lasers. So for example, the Solaris program from ESA aims to operate solar-powered satellites by 2030. But also, for example, textiles. You can see this little astronaut on the right-hand side of the slide. Textiles are used obviously for spacesuits, but also for inflatable habitats and space structures, for spacecraft insulations. There's a very prominent example for that from Austria, for landing parachutes, for cable insulations. So there's a lot of applications for textile in space. Electronics, ESA is also a broad area. They can be used in spacecraft and satellite systems. Software and algorithms, especially when it comes to downstream applications. Think about Earth observation, where enormous amounts of data have to be processed. Building and construction is quite a topic. You may heard of space-based manufacturing and assembly, such as, for example, 3D printing. There is this example of the Made in Space zero-G printer, which was launched to the ISS already in 2014 and manufactured the first 3D printed object in space. Last but not least, I would like to mention circular economy. When you think of space habitats, of course, you also have to think of a circular economy, for example, the water, the food you have there, everything you have there. Since many years, ESA is involved in the Melissa project, where circular economy approaches are developed and tested for space. So this all looks like endless opportunities, but where is the catch? The catch is the timeline. I'd like to show you the hype cycle of in-space economy. So this is a slide that was produced by Eric Kulu. Data in Space. I'd like to recommend his website, Factories in Space. And this hype cycle is based on Gartner's hype cycle, and it shows basically which opportunities are in the line for space and how long will it take to generate revenues out of them. So on the right hand side, you see how long it will take for them to succeed. The first thing that you can see here, none of this opportunity that is listed on the left-hand side is green. So none of these opportunities will be in space, or the plateau will be reached in less than 2 years. Most of the opportunities are, for all the other applications, are somewhat 5 years plus ahead. So this is something really important that you need to take into account when entering into the space domain. It's a long journey, no matter whether you are in the old or in the new space domain. So you have to have a long breath in space. What companies can do, or what they often do, they use the following paths. They develop technologies or services for old space players, where there is usually enough budget for technology development available. For example, you can develop a technology with ESA, and as soon as they have mature technologies, they try to commercialize them for the new space market. I think Alexander will talk about the opportunities and pitfalls of industrialization in his speech in more detail. I can see that I have already used more of my time than I was supposed to, so I will skip the next slide and just go into my summary slide, if that's okay. So summarizing the whole thing, I think there is a lot of opportunities in space. Most of the opportunities, as always, they look very promising, but they come with a catch. So you always have to consider that the space industry still is quite conservative, and everything takes longer than expected. However, it is important that the markets change from government-driven to commercial-driven markets, with new space opportunities emerging due to the lower launch costs and increased private investments. For me, a very important trend is the use of dual-use technologies, but also sustainability. I mentioned circular economy and innovative business models. I think companies also in Europe can take advantage of existing space infrastructure to establish successful new space ventures. They can do that with the help of the old space players. As mentioned, you can develop technologies with the old space players such as ESA and then commercialize them. Lastly, the in-space economy is expected to grow or to continue to grow worldwide. You have to look at the worldwide market and not only on Europe. So this will offer numerous business opportunities for you. Thank you. And I think there will be room for questions in the end of the webinar, right?